So welcome everyone to the junior college kickoff night. And I want to just start by saying, of course, I'm Lauren Cook, your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising. Hopefully I have met most of you. I also know we have a lot of siblings in this class, so I'll just say to some of the repeat parents up front, we've got some new slides, we've got some new content tonight. So if you've sat through this before, stay tuned. It will be a little bit different, which is hopefully fun. I want to thank you for tolerating Zoom. Most of my contact, obviously, with families and students at JCHS is in person. But I have found that having this event online can be helpful for two reasons. One, we have not all commuted to JCHS for 45 minutes to then commute back home. And of course, we can record this so that folks not with us that might be at tech rehearsal tonight for the play or other things are able to watch it later in the week. So thank you for that. And we'll keep this as engaging and concise as possible. And then a couple of housekeeping items up top. Everyone's on mute. That's usually the default in my Zoom room. I'd ask you to stay that way as I do some formal remarks here for the first 20 or 30 minutes. But then I'll open up the floor for questions, which we can put in the chat box, or you can raise your Zoom hand, and we'll go through them as efficiently as possible. I expect the meeting to run an hour. If you don't have questions that take us up until 7:30, that's great. We'll wrap earlier. If there's more questions than we're able to get to, we are going to have a hard stop at 7:30. Again, I want to respect everybody's time, but know that you have my full attention for the next year and a half. So this is not your last opportunity to have all those questions answered. And this is being recorded for those unable to attend. And I just sent out a PowerPoint overview about 10 minutes ago. So if you want to refer back to it, take notes, follow along, you're welcome to. If you would just like to listen to my soothing voice and watch the video, that's fine as well. So with that, this is the official launch of your college search. I think it's an exciting time. I love it. Feels like a new season for me at JCHS, a new cast of characters as I get to know all of you. I know it may also be a little anxiety provoking for some folks as you think about graduating high school and what's going to come next. Hope you're going to have a lot of great options to choose from. So we're just going to do this sort of one step at a time. And if you're feeling not ready for college yet, that's okay. You're not going yet. This is a long-term project that we have to start really a year and a half in advance, but you've got plenty of time to work through the transitions of all of this before you're headed out the door. And everyone's process is going to look different. Just like every student at JCHS is different, you're all going to have different sort of goals and dreams that you want to do post high school. And I really want to encourage you to keep this process grounded in you and personalization and what it is that you want for yourself. Not what your friends are doing, not what TikTok tells you should do, not the schools the New York Times is talking about. This is about finding a pathway for you. And that's not a one-size-fits-all situation. You're not doing this alone, of course. You've got a team that's going to include your parents. It's going to include some faculty members at school, especially folks who might end up writing recommendation letters for you. You might have a few select friends that you let in on what your plans are and strategy and all of that. And of course, me. I'm here to sort of be the coach for the team. In the next year and a half, our goals are going to be for you to really kind of reflect on your time at JCHS, what has worked for you, maybe what hasn't worked for you, how we can use that information to fine-tune things as we think about your next steps after high school. We're going to look for options that fit that vision for yourself. And then, the goal is by the spring of your senior year that we've got a range of choices that I'm helping you kind of navigate how to make your final decision. And here's where I want to just pull over and name that there are a ton of different pathways you can have after high school. And we have students that go off to community college and might get their associates or choose to transfer to a UC or another four-year school. We've got folks that choose to do a gap year, both here in the States, abroad. Many of them are going to Israel. We've got folks that choose to engage with the armed forces, whether that's a service academy, whether that's the IDF. All of these are totally great pathways. But the majority of our students, and it was 98% of last year's class, go off to a four-year college. And so that's going to be the focus of my comments tonight because it is the most complicated, takes the most planning, right? But I want to name that whatever your pathway is, I want to know about it and help you and support you get there. So With that, that's the big picture. We're going to take this in bite-sized chunks, and I'm actually going to encourage you and your parents, because parents can get a little ahead of themselves, to focus on the steps right in front of us as we're going through this, rather than trying to tackle the whole thing and think about financial aid forms for next fall and all the rest, because it can be overwhelming. So we're going to start tonight with just some of the first steps. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our agenda. We're in the welcome and context part of the evening. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to find the right fit for you and how to think about attributes that you might want from a college. Um, I'll then go over generally what's in an application, what we're going to be building for you over this next year that you'll submit to colleges. We'll talk about what a quality college list will look like, and how to build that. I'm going to talk a little bit about your college team that I just mentioned and who kind of does what as we're going forward. And then we'll wrap up with some immediate next steps, like literally when you log off Zoom, what will come next tonight, and then have some brief Q&A. Okay, so the first step in figuring out the right college fit for you is going to start with you and sort of determining some of your priorities. I think sometimes students want to jump right into college names and starting to build that list, but there are literally like 4,000 some colleges just in the US, to say nothing about, the rest of the globe. And we can't begin to sort of winnow down and edit down the choices that are right for you without some understanding of what you might be looking for, right? So we want to think about your identity, your learning style, your values, your interests, and then think about what is this kind of list, maybe like a rubric that we're coming up with to then judge colleges against, right? So thinking about what works for you academically, socially, financially, and what's going to work for your family. And then, of course, the big question of can you get in, which we'll come back to in a moment. But as you think about these things, do small classes work for you? Do you want to have a strong Jewish community? Is it super important that you're able to do rock climbing? Is that like your life outside of school? Is merit aid going to be important to your family to help pay some of the bills? These are obviously not college specific. They're specific attributes that you might be looking for. And so you're not going to know this right away, but it is something that we want to start thinking and talking about over the next few weeks and months so we can figure out how that will then drive the schools that we put on your list. So as I want you to think about these attributes, you will have some homework that will help you, think about these things. And the first is at 7:45 tonight, literally after we hang up, everyone's going to get in their inbox a college advising questionnaire. And there's one for students and there's one for parents. And I'll say a little bit more about that later, but know that this is an important tool, both to help you start thinking about some of the things that might be important to you, as well as for us to kind of get to know each other if we haven't had extensive interactions yet. After you complete that questionnaire, you will book your first meeting with me. And these are one-on-one, just the students for that first meeting. And the earliest ones are this Friday. So if you're like raring to go, you can crank that questionnaire out in the next 24 hours, get booked, and we're off and running. If you are not so sure about all this yet, the very final due date for a questionnaire is the end of winter break. So I will do these meetings all throughout December and January. But the steps will be questionnaire first, then we book the meeting, and then we have a meeting. And in that meeting, I'll talk a little bit more later about what we'll cover, but you will later that day have a starter list for yourself of colleges in SCORE. And if you've got some schools in SCORE right now, that's great. I will just kind of help round it out a little bit. But if it's a blank slate, love it. I'm going to pop 15 or 20 schools in there for you to start thinking about. And then you've got a lot of resources to start learning about these schools. If you haven't heard of some of them, that's great. They haven't heard of you. So we're all going to kind of get to know each other at once. And you've got a number of resources just right at your fingertips. SCORE is a good place to start. You can get a lot of basic data, size, location. There's some video overviews and whatnot right in SCORE. I will also note that you might want to invest in or borrow from my office. I've got about 10 copies of this telephone-sized book, well, old school telephone, The FIS Guide to Colleges, which is not produced by colleges. It's a third-party organization that culls together information about different campuses. So I really think it can be helpful in getting an accurate vibe of what the social life is like, academic life, all of that, that's not coming from the college PR offices, right? And both SCORE and the FIS Guide side, as you're reading about an individual college, have overlaps as a section. So if you find, wow, like American University in DC sounds like it might really work for me, um, there will tell you where else people apply. Oftentimes, like George Washington University in DC is an overlap for American. So it can help you kind of go down a rabbit hole of like schools. Okay, after the FIS guide, I would say Big Future, which is a search website off of the College Board website. They have a really good search function. You can filter on a lot of different things, a lot of those attributes you might be interested in, and keep working on your school list. And then, of course, going straight to the source. So whether that's doing some virtual college visits, which have gotten much better since COVID. So there's virtual tours, there's virtual info sessions. You can just sit in your bedroom and learn about a school, or of course, getting on campus is the next best thing. So this is going to help you start to figure out what some of the fit is going to look like. And maybe you're feeling a little locked in right now. Yeah, you've got like a rubric, you've got some schools you're thinking about, you're getting excited, but we do need to circle back to that question of, can you get in? So, in some cases, it's tricky to answer that question, right? It is a little bit unknown. And I do want to pull over and mention here that the average acceptance rate of colleges in the US last year was 70%, right? So just to be clear, the majority of US colleges admit the majority of their applicants. So most colleges you can get into and they want you there, right? But there are, of course, 50 to 100, some schools with these teeny tiny acceptance rates. They are outliers in this bigger process. But we focus on these because we're human, right? And we are interested in places that might not be interested in us. So to understand your chances of admission at all of these places, but specifically some of these outliers that are denying more students than they're admitting, let's talk about what's considered for admission. So when we think about your application and understanding your chances of acceptance, I'm going to go through kind of an exhaustive list of what might be included in an application. Not everybody wants all of these things. In fact, our California state public schools, the University of California and the Cal State University, ask for about half of these things. But just so you get the full scope of what might be asked for, we will start, of course, with your transcript. You ask any admission rep what is the most important part of the application. They're going to say your academic record. And I will say that consistency is more important than sort of like late heroics. You don't need to like load up on all the APs next year or whatnot. Having a solid year this year, getting yourself off to a great start next fall, that is important. And they are excited about students who've been consistent or who are on an upward trend, who are locking in, who are really, doing better over time. I think there is more concern when it's a bit more chaotic or there's a downward trend, right? So it's important that we're paying attention to how you're doing in your classes. Essays will also be asked for. There's usually one longer essay on the common application, and then lots of shorter things may be asked for by different institutions. And this is a chance for you to share your voice, your personality, your story, so that they can get a little sense of who you are outside of all the numbers. There will always be an activities list. This is achievements. This is letting them know what's important to you, what you've committed to maybe over time. Sometimes it can build a narrative that you're like totally a theater person or that you're really into engineering. Sometimes it just shows that you're like a high achieving generalist with a lot of different interests, and that's great too. It doesn't have to all be sort of around the same thing, but they do want to know how you're spending your time. And they think broadly about this. This can be jobs, this can be taking care of family members, this can be hobbies you engage in. It doesn't all have to be like clubs and formal activities and whatnot. Recommendation letters are typically required. Often it is two faculty members that will write one for you, and then I write one on behalf of kind of JCHS, giving a bigger picture of who you are in the community. And they want to know who you are in the classroom, how others might experience you, your drive, reaction to setbacks, all that kind of thing. And then, of course, there is testing. Hopefully you had a chance to watch a Compass video to get sort of the lay of the land, as testing has been shifting quite a bit over the last few years. If not, that's okay. I'm going to just give you the headlines here. There's no blanket testing advice anymore. I will say that firmly. One size does not fit all. I'm going to work with each of you individually about what's the best plan for you in light of both your early testing data and the types of schools that you might be looking at. But I will say that testing can add value for some applicants. Absolutely. If you're great at standardized tests, amazing, we're going to take them. And if someone's not on mute, I just ask you to make sure you mute yourself. I will also say testing does not hold as much weight as it once did. So parents, hear me when I say it's very different from when we applied to college 30, 40 years ago. Testing does not hold as much weight as it once did. Even the places that require it, it is further down this list of order of importance. And only some of the most selective places right now are requiring test scores. So many of the Ivies have gone back to requiring testing, and then highly technical places like a Caltech and MIT, those are requiring testing as well. But here in California, the University of California system, the CSUs, test free. They do not want an SAT or an ACT. They might ask for AP test scores. They look at those as a little bit more drilled down and significant. So we're going to talk individually about if you'll be on a testing pathway based on your testing and your list, and then which test to pursue, test prep, and all the rest. Okay, also, we've got on the list interviews. These are often offered by smaller places. Some of the Ivies offer them as well. And this is a chance to bring, again, some personality to the paperwork. They're never required. They're always optional. But I would say they can almost always be value added unless you are a seriously shy or sort of socially awkward person. I think it's just always nice to take advantage of this opportunity if it's presented to you. But many big schools and public places do not offer them. And then finally, I mentioned some of this in my early emails about coming to college visits at JCHS. Some schools care about what kind of contact and how much contact you've had with the college, and they call that demonstrated interest. Some places like the UCs don't care. They're big. They, are not keeping track of these things. Other places really care. And so if you end up having some schools on your list that really care, I'm usually aware of that, and I'm able to guide you on that. An example would be like Tulane. They get 1 million applications, and they are more likely to take the kids that have interfaced with them, that know something about them, can demonstrate the fit with the school in their application. Okay, I'll go through all of these things with you individually. College Advising supports you with all of these. I edit your writing. We practice interviews together. So you will have some help in putting this all together. But note that these are all things that are under your control. Now, I will hear from parents or students sometimes that college admission just feels random, that it's like a lottery. I'm going to apply to 25 places and my number is bound to come up somewhere. That's not it at all. And while it can be a little confusing sometimes from the outside to see why one student might have got in and one student did not, there is an internal logic to it at each school. And when you talk about it being random, that's usually a sign that you have not interfaced with things like institutional priorities and hooks. And this is an additional set of criteria that you don't generally have control over, but that colleges are also considering. So I'm going to just run through this a little bit as well, so you understand some of what may be going on behind the scenes. So students that are in special populations. This could be legacy students, so students who have had a sibling or a parent attend that school. They don't care about great Aunt Norma. I'm so sorry. Extended family members are usually not in this, but legacies are siblings and parents, and then you might sort of rise more to the top of the pool. VIP status, so children of public figures, celebrities, major donors. If you are a celebrity or a public figure, you are going to get some preference in the process. And then children of faculty and staff also can receive some preference. Underrepresented populations, which sadly California is not. But if you lived in South Dakota or Idaho or somewhere where there are fewer 17-year-olds and the school's very interested in having all 50 states represented, that can be to your advantage as well. Colleges are also under scrutiny to be educating broad ranges of folks. So if you are first generation to college, which means that neither of your parents attended a four-year institution, you might receive some preference. If you are a Pell Grant recipient, for example, so folks in the lowest economic bracket, that can be a shorthand for institutions to note that they're serving an economically diverse range of students. So that can be helpful to you. Then, of course, folks with special talents, there's always recruited athletes. There might be outstanding ballerinas or drum players or whatnot that can receive some preference. And then there might be just other school specific priorities. So it might be a small liberal arts college that needs a tuba player to round out, the orchestra or the marching band. They might have a new major in data science or public health that they're trying to fill seats with. So you can ask colleges if they have any particular priorities for the year. And I think that can come across as a rather savvy question. But know that this is sort of happening in the background along with that application you've put together. And it's not always equitable, but this is sort of the landscape in which we're operating. We will review your factors and priorities in the process if you have any of them, and it can help us have a better sense of if you can get in somewhere and even if you can pay for it, because sometimes there's money attached to, say, like the special talents or whatnot. Okay, so we were locked in, right? And I don't want to have this like application priority information sort of dampen your spirits about your list. I just want us to be clear-eyed about your chances and strategic with this information. So now we're going to move on to talking about building that list. So I usually want students to eventually, by the end of the summer, have come up with 10 to 12 schools that you're thinking about applying to. At first, right now, we're just bookmarking in SCORE places you're thinking about. It'll be your following list in SCORE. They use very social media speak. But the end goal is to get it down to about 10 or 12 schools in the next 6 to 8 months. And on average, JCHS students apply to 10 colleges in total. So that's generally what we're looking for. We want to be sane about this rather than focused exclusively on highly rejected name brands. So an ideal list is going to be made up of 3 or 4 reach schools, 4 or 5 possible schools, and 2 or 3 likely schools. Let's define what these categories are. So reach schools are places where your profile, so your GPA, maybe your test scores, your rigor, is below the average admitted student. And you can find out an average admitted student profile usually on a college's website. We've also got some data in SCORE that I will be showing you in your first meetings. There's little scattergrams for each college of past applicants from JCHS, and you can line up and see where you might fall in that. If you are below the average student profile, it's a reach for you. And this is not personal, it's just data. Also, those very highly rejected schools that have admit rates of under 20% are generally a universal reach for everybody. So like Stanford, I'm not calling it a likely for anyone, obviously, with their like 2% admit rate. So the category here is aspirational, right? Something you would like, but pragmatically might not happen. The odds are not ever in your favor. So we want to have a couple of these, but the whole list should not be reach schools. Possible schools are where right in the sweet spot. You are right where their average admitted student is. You're very competitive as an applicant. You might even get some merit aid for them if you're sort of on the upper end of their average profile. So this category is realistic, right? And that's why we want to have a good chunk on your list that are possible schools. And then likely schools are where you are above the admitted student profile, right? And they might have a real strong acceptance rate of 70, 80% or so. So you are likely not just going to get in, but potentially get a lot of merit money to enroll there. And so it means you're likely to be able to pay for it. That's that likely category can also denote financially what might happen with you. So this category is assurance, right? This is where we know you're going to go to college. So that's why we want your list ultimately to have all of these categories. We're not going to name your admission prediction right out the gate, but it is something that I will start to apply to your list once we're done with junior year. Okay, so we've talked about fit, pieces of the application, building your list. What's left is your team. Who are you doing this all with? What are your different roles? So your team is going to start with student. You are driving the process, all right? You are taking the lead on the destination, on the execution of it. You should own your timeline. Eventually, you will be needing to know and track your deadlines with some support from mom and me, perhaps, but you are in charge of this. You are also the main communicator. That means with me, that means with colleges, that means with teachers that may be involved in the process with you. You are also creating the content in your application, right? It's your voice, it's your experience, not your friends. Mom's not going to write your essay for you, not AI, right? We want you to be generating this yourself. And then ultimately, you're the only one who can answer the question of what's the best fit for you, right? So you are going to be driving each of these things, but you obviously are not working alone. Your parents, and maybe some of the parents will be surprised to hear some of this, but parent role is around strategy and helping to provide resources and framework and support. So they're going to do some logistics, help with looking into test prep with my advice, maybe paying application fees, helping to plan campus visits and do the logistics of that. They are also there to help coach, not necessarily sort of edit and write things for you, but offer perspective on application components, bounce ideas off of. They are also a financial filter that you may need to access depending on your family. They are going to be paying the bills, so they do get to communicate if there is a budget for this and what we need to stay within. And then hopefully they're also providing some emotional support, listening, offering encouragement, managing stress, which you will get from me as well via the chocolate and Kleenex in my office and all the rest. So then for me, I'm carrying the flag on the tour as your expert guide. This is not my first rodeo, so I am here to help. I can provide a high level of knowledge about the process, the current landscape, and help you with the timeline and sort of pacing your work out as we go through the next year and a half. I'm also going to manage score, obviously, and give you various resources along the way, whether that's test prep or how to learn more about various schools. And I'm going to work with your recommenders on making sure that they're writing quality recommendations and that they're all in on time. I will keep providing course and scheduling advice. I'm going to check your transcripts for accuracy and make sure that everything actually gets out to colleges once you've submitted your part of the application. And then I'm your liaison to colleges. So I draft that official school recommendation, communicate with colleges on behalf of you and on behalf of JCHS. So I'm a key resource. I'm going to just say now it is very important that you read my emails. It's my main way of communicating with you if we're not, in person sitting across from each other. I'm going to have some miscooked deadlines it's important that you adhere to. And I'm going to just ask for you to listen to my advice so you can have the best possible outcomes with your search. I am your biggest cheerleader in this, probably next to your parents or guardians, but I need you to help me help you, right? Okay, so we're moving towards the end of me monologuing. And the last piece is to review next steps, what we're going to do once we log off of Zoom. So every one of you are going to get a questionnaire in your inbox tonight. It is required for students. Before you can set up that meeting with me, you got to do this questionnaire. It is optional for parents. And as I said, you can do it tonight, you can do it in the next few weeks. It's really by the end of winter break that's the hard stop for you to have turned it in. And students, it's asking, who are you? What have you involved with at JCHS? What do you want for your future? And if you have trouble with any of the questions, feel free to just also, as you try and write some things out, say, let's talk about this more in person. I'm happy to keep digging so it doesn't have to all be typed out. But I will say that this is the beginning of your counselor letter. It is the beginning of us getting introduced to each other. So I'm only able to be a good advocate for you if you're giving me some thorough information about yourself. So again, help me help you. Parents, this is, asking what should I know about your child? Do you have certain aspirations? Are there certain colleges important to your family? Anything contextually that would be good to know. So while it's optional, it's always super valuable when parents, and both parents can fill it out if they would like. I know you probably each have different takes on your kids. After I get your questionnaire, I will send a link to a sign-up sheet and we will schedule a meeting. In this first meeting, we may talk about your questionnaire. I may ask some follow-up questions. We'll start talking about a testing plan, if you're going to be on the testing train or not. And just for context sake, this current senior class, about 2/3 of them took the SAT or the ACT. So a third didn't. So there's still, the majority of colleges are test optional. So we will figure out what will work best for you. We will start brainstorming who might be good people to write recommendation letters for you. We're not asking anyone yet. That will happen at the end of the school year, but just start to get you thinking about certain teachers, maybe if there's a rabbi at your shul, coach, a boss that might make sense. And then we'll talk about if you visited any campuses, if you've got some early takes on places that you're excited about, and if you haven't, how to start thinking about signing up and doing those. After that meeting, again, I will either add a whole college list to score for you or just do a little augmenting to what you've already got going in there. Um, and then you will have some homework to start doing some research to get yourself on mailing lists for some of those schools and get out and start interfacing with campuses. And parents, after that first meeting, I am happy then to take questions from anybody, email, jump on Zoom, have a family meeting in my office on Zoom, whatever your needs are. And students, if you need to not think about it again for a month or two, that's fine. But everybody is required to have a second meeting with me at the end of the school year so we can touch base and see what's going on. Okay, from there, I'm going to pause presentation mode. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to look at the brave souls that have their camera on. Thanks to those of you who do. And I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions. We are exactly 30 minutes into the meeting. So you can either raise your little Zoom hand or type something in the chat, either to everyone or to me specifically, and I can just sort of read it out anonymously. But if there's anything generally that this has surfaced for you, let me know. It's a lot, so I know we're just going to let it settle. Anyone? Anyone? I will offer a few pieces of information. If any of you are sitting here eagerly thinking about gap years, know that that is something that we will also talk. And there's a question on the questionnaire about if a student is thinking about a gap year, just so I can start to get a sense of that. That process typically doesn't start until November or December in terms of applications of senior year. And those are for folks who are looking at seminary, looking at mejinas. So it is a little further off and often a much easier and more focused sort of decision as to where folks might be looking and applying. But it is something that we will start talking about as well. Okay, we've got a few things in the chat. Excellent. So, question about good timing for test prep classes. Yes, so some of you may already be prepping. One or two of you may already be testing, and that's fine. We're all on a different journey here. But for most of you, we're going to have that first conversation. We can look at your early results of if you took both the ACT and the SAT practice test. Some of you may have a very strong feeling about, yes, I'm doing it, or absolutely not. But many of you are going to be in the middle in the gray area. So let's figure out which test you might feel like you need to run with. And then I would say to start thinking about prep potentially in January. And prep is best when it is a short and focused effort, typically at least 6 to 8 weeks before you're sitting for a test. And I usually don't think students need to be testing, partially just because of the curriculum of junior year sets you up to test well by March, April, May or June. And so depending on national test dates, we may have to navigate around journeys, around PASOK, but starting test prep at the beginning of the new year is really fine. And that is sort of the normal pace for most folks. And what prep looks like, there can be free things. If you're good with independently structuring your time, you might be able to do it without a bunch of money or outside assistance. But you can spend as much as you'd like on test prep. This is one of those areas where folks really want to take advantage of the anxiety with the process. But the best test prep is having you toggle between practicing tests, so you get kind of in the testing zone and used to the time management of it all, and content and sort of looking at how you've done on practice tests and drilling down on those things that you're missing. Again, we will talk more about that individually as I meet with each folk. If we don't end up having a meeting in December and you want to get some guidance on testing, I have done some early assessment looking at everybody's practice scores, so we could do some stuff over email as well. Know that. Oh, thank you for the compliments. Okay, do you have info on trade schools? Yes and no. And this is something we can absolutely talk about. And so please put in the questionnaire what you're sort of thinking about and whatnot. We do have folks in the past that have thought about, and I think it's an excellent choice to think about whether it's, going into electrical work or whether it's auto repair, things that can be very pragmatic and have good return on investment. Many of our local community colleges have those pathways, so it doesn't have to be a big research project to figure those out. But please indicate some early thoughts on what you're thinking about in the questionnaire, and we will run with it from there. Okay, when should students start taking the College Board test? Yes, so College Board presumes you're taking the SAT. I am just going to shout out as a native Midwesterner, the ACT is accepted, both of these things, everywhere. And for quite a while in the last 5 or 10 years, the ACT has been the more access test than the SAT as they've been tinkering with the format. Now that's flopping a little bit as the ACT is tinkering. But as we figure out which one you're going to run with, I would say again, booking a sitting in March, April, May, somewhere in there for your first sitting is smart. You will also want to look if you're taking AP classes right now, when AP testing is those first 2 weeks of May. Sometimes it can be a crunch if you're trying to do both of these things at once. So you'll want to navigate your own personal family calendar around when you can back up 6 or 8 weeks and be doing test prep from there. But I generally recommend trying to do at least one test in the spring, early summer of junior year, and then one in the summer or early fall of senior year. Two is often good for folks. It does give you room to still do a third one in the fall and like say October before we get to early deadlines. More than 3 times on these tests, and I think we start to see like the law of diminishing returns, that you hit a score ceiling or it even can start to fall a little bit. And while most colleges are not asking for your entire testing record anymore, that was like a thing before the pandemic where they wanted to see every test you'd taken. I do think it can start to become a bad look. There are a couple that are starting to ask for your whole testing history if you're taking it 3, 4, 5 times. So 2 is pretty average, and having a backup room for a third if you really feel like you need it would make sense. Have there been problems scheduling a test date? Great question. And this is from a returning parent who probably experienced this with their older child. Things got a lot better this year in terms of being able to actually register for a test sitting. Demand has been strange in the few years after COVID, coupled with the fact that since the California publics no longer require the ACT or the SAT, fewer high schools here were actually offering testing. So for a couple of years here, it's been a little bit of a Hunger Games to try and get an actual registration secured. That loosened up quite a bit this past fall. College Board and ACT have really gotten the memo. And they were renting out like the Moscone Center and having kids do them in ballrooms and conference rooms there if they weren't at local high schools. So I think it's going to be less stressful to get a sitting, but I think it probably wouldn't hurt once we decide on which test you're going to go with to book the May or June date now. And if you need to move it around or change it or cancel it, you can get refunded most of your money, but I think it doesn't hurt to have sort of a place saver there. But it's much less stressful than it had been with perhaps your older child. Oh, and then we've got another question just about other than testing, has anything changed much since our eldest started this journey? And I would say uh, generally no, other than some of the testing continuing to be sort of a moving target. One thing I have noticed this fall is that many schools are still test optional, right? So for students who've chosen to report their test scores, we have had some follow up from colleges saying, oh, we need an official report. So for the past few years, you've been able to self-report your scores on your applications and they just trust you. And if you end up enrolling at that one school you enroll at, they want you to pay $12 to College Board to send them the official score report to make sure you were being honest, right? I've had a few more schools this year saying, no, we want that official score report right out the gate, which is aggravating because it's just another fee in this process. But that's the only thing I'm noticing on the edges. So far, things have been relatively the same. Now, of course, there's lots of conversation about AI, which can be a whole other session. I'm not going to open that can of worms right now, but that's all the buzz at my conferences, both about how colleges may be using it to review your applications. And if, the college essay is going to be different, go the way of, what's old, a typewriter. So as it's being sort of almost forced on us in some of our word processing platforms. So stay tuned on that. But for now, they're still asking for essays, et cetera. Oh, and that's the next question. Medical schools are now allowing AI written essays. How about undergrad? I would say generally no. And this is something at the end of the year in your junior English classes, whether in your AP or the American Literature course, I'm going to make a guest appearance, and you are going to have as your very last assignment writing a draft college essay. And so we'll talk more then, and I will have updates at that point about what AI policies are looking like for college admission offices. But there's a lot out there right now. They vary pretty widely. Brown is an example where they say on their website, absolutely no use of AI. If we detect AI in your application, you're automatically, sort of having your application withdrawn or admission rescinded or whatever. Other places like a Caltech, for example, that's obviously into technology, is more nuanced in how they talk about it and have some longer things about ethical use of AI, unethical use of AI. So we'll talk about that a bit in that unit in your English classes so that we have more up-to-date information because there's many months before you'll be applying, and to look at some of the range of those policies. And when in doubt, ask me and try and use your own words because it's still a bit of a Wild West out there. Okay. What's your take on the college scam? I'm wondering if we're referring to like Varsity Blues, a couple of years ago, where there was sort of a pay for play situation, or in the more egregious places where people were getting photoshopped into like a crew boat or whatnot when they didn't row crew and being recruited athletes. I would just say that there've been a lot of backstops and changes to the industry since that came up. But there are, if we want to just talk about scams generally, there are, as I referenced earlier, a lot of people out there wanting to make money off of your anxiety around this process. And I will say a lot of that anxiety is probably unnecessary because, as I said, a lot of colleges really want your kids. So if you get a piece of mail, if you get an offer in email, if you get, a request for $100, you can be printed in this honors book of who's who, whatever. That's usually a scam, but if you're not sure, let me know. Scan me a photo of it, forward me the email, and I am happy to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of what is something to pay attention to and what is someone just trying to get your attention. In the past, you have held a scheduled SAT test at JCHS in the fall for seniors. Do you offer the same for ACT? Great question. So the short answer is no. We don't do a school day ACT. The school day SAT has cropped up from that competition for seats that we were dealing with the past few years. And because we already block a day out to do the PSAT, so to have that practice test experience. We really can't block another day out for the ACT because we're often at the legal limit for days we need to be in school with the Jewish holidays and all the rest. But depending on, sometimes folks with complex learning profiles have school day testing available to them for the ACT, where Dr. Neufeld will do the proctoring there. We can talk about if there are things that can be done to try and make that process easier for you. And I will say we haven't decided yet whether we're going to do that school day SAT again next fall. It's sort of something we decide on a case-by-case basis, because let me tell you, Ms. Glock and Dr. Burrell would love for seniors to have that time to work on their keystones. So TBD on what will happen with that school day SAT. Question about, is it a disadvantage to not submit a test score for a test optional school? Great question. And I have been helping students navigate this for the past few weeks as they're submitting their applications. And I will say, just because you take a test and you sit for it doesn't mean we're actually going to decide to send it to a college. And I'm finding myself going school by school with students because, again, a reach school, your score may not quite be in their average or in their sort of middle 50% of admitted student test scores. So if they are test optional, we may decide to leave that out because it's not going to be value added for you, right? But if you are within that middle 50%, and most colleges have this on their website, we can do a quick Google and look and see if you're falling in their ballpark, then yes, I think it is value added to send it in. And certainly if you're well above their average, yeah, it's just going to help. So this is, another complex, it depends part of the process. But generally, the schools that are test optional are very clear in saying, we really mean it, right? That this is not a trick. This is not a gimmick. This is not, we're not trying to play psychological games with you. And in fact, some schools, and I know University of Chicago is one of them, and I heard another one this fall, are talking about having a no harm policy, meaning that if you really don't know what to do, send your score in. And if they find it to be sort of below what their averages are, it doesn't do any harm for you. It's not going to be a detraction. They will just set it aside. I don't know how they're doing that sort of mentally, but I think they really want you to earnestly take them at their word. And if they did want testing, they would require it. I think we're in enough of a landscape where it's not so verboten anymore to go back to requiring tests. Another question, can we submit test scores to schools that don't require them? Is that seen as helpful, especially for UCs? And I'm assuming that's CSUs. So there is a place on the UC application and the CSU application to add an SAT or an ACT score, but that is suppressed when they are reading the application. The only reason they ask for that is later on, if you're admitted, that can be used in place of a placement test for like math, for your English level course, sort of registration in the fall. So you can put it in there. They're not going to see it. They're not going to look at it. They will look at AP scores. That's something universally everybody is sort of still accepting. But you can't sort of like force your scores on them, even if you might want to. Okay. And then, we have some context. So many students graduate and can't find jobs. They're in debt with financial aid. Yes. The college scam by Charlie Kirk. Yes. So I will say, generally, college is not for everybody. I do think that folks that attend a school like JCHS are more inclined to be looking at a four-year institution, but is not a foregone conclusion. It doesn't have to be the default. And I do think that we are in a place right now where financially it's a real crunch for a lot of families, and the return on investment is still quite high. I think there is still a real economic imperative. You see that earners are at a much higher rate when you've been to a four-year college than when you have no degree or an associate's degree, that the average sort of salary and income and growth over time. There is some benefit to the four-year institution, but that's only if you've not taken out a crushing amount of debt, right? And that you have taken the time to be studying in a field that has some return on investment, that you've taken the time to do internships and get practical work experience to position yourself well to do something with that four-year education. And so we also have, a suite of financial advice sessions with College Money Method to help you avoid some of the pitfalls. And I will also note that what's out in the media generally is a lot of clickbait, whether that's, the person who's $100,000 in debt with college stuff. That's rare. That's not the average person, just as it's not the average person getting denied to every school they applied to. I would want to know what that list looked like and if it was all reaches, right? So try not to be swung and have your nervous system activated by everything you see in the news. This is not a time to put like a college Google alert on your Google thing, because it will just raise your blood pressure. Again, come check with me if you've got questions about things, concerns about things. And of course, I want to meet your family wherever you're at and whatever your goals are post JCHS. Okay, can you give an overview of what's the current situation with junior transfers to UCs and when it's a good choice? Absolutely. So we always have at least a student or two in the class that graduates and goes on to a California community college. And we are so lucky to be in the state of California, where we've got a really strong community college system that is everywhere, that you can access one, and whether it's in person, whether it's online. And all of our community college offer what's called the Transfer Admission Guarantee, the TAG program. And that is with the University of California system specifically, where if you do your general education requirements, and they have counselors on campus to help you understand what that course lineup should look like and what sort of grade average you need to generally be in the range of, then you are guaranteed admission to at least one UC campus. And you do have to, when you end up then applying to transfer to a UC in your sophomore year, you have to designate one UC as the place that you want the guarantee to. but you can apply to as many of them as possible, and it is possible that you will get multiple offers, right? So right now it's either 5 or 6 of the UCs that offer that guarantee. So it's not the very most selective ones. UCLA, Berkeley, and I believe San Diego do not participate in the guarantee, but they do have a real thumb on the scale for community college transfers. It's part of their mandate. It's part of the legislation from Sacramento that a certain percentage of their incoming students have to be transfer students each year, and the bulk of those are generally community college students. So I would say this is a great pathway for families who are keeping an eye on finances, right? Because community college is going to be the most affordable pathway for that first half of college. And then the UCs have a pretty reasonable tuition rate when you're looking as an in-state student and the grand landscape of four-year college tuition right now. I will also say it can be good for a student who is still working on their independence and whether they want to live at home or whether they choose to be, we have some students that have like moved to Santa Barbara and gotten an apartment and go to Santa Barbara Community College for 2 years and then have applied to transfer to UC Santa Barbara. And that's all been a very smooth pathway. So it can be kind of a staging process for getting out of the house and traveling and all the rest. What I do caution folks about is that you do have the entire world taking classes at community colleges, right? It's adult learners, it's veterans, it's folks who bombed high school and are sort of restarting their academic sort of base layer to then transfer off to colleges. So your peer group can be really varied. And so this is a path for folks who know that they can focus, who can find that tag office and get advice from the advisor and sort of stay on that pathway because your cohort is not necessarily all transfer driven, all four-year college driven, et cetera. So just context to be aware of as you're thinking about the options. But I think that it's a really excellent pathway to think about. And if you have more questions, we can talk about it. But some folks do put in score some community colleges if they're thinking about them, but there's no real application process you have to do there. You just have to register as a full-time student. So it's something that's a likely college for you on your list. Okay, another question. The auto acceptance to CSUs from California high schools, how would that work for a JCHS student? So if folks have not heard this news story, within the new application cycle, so for your class, there's new legislation that is making an auto admit from California public schools. And I believe they're testing it with certain counties. So this is not applicable to independent high school students for next fall. So the short answer is it won't work for a JCHS student. But I will say that our students are getting into CSUs all the time. That's, we are way more than eligible for students. I think you need 15 classes. That's your eligibility baseline for CSUs. And I know this because I've just been reviewing all of our CSU applications. On average, our students have 28 or 29 credits for the CSUs. And we have folks getting into Cal Poly, Long Beach, Fullerton, Northridge, a lot of the more selective places every year. So hopefully in the future, there will be, some liaison work between independent high schools and the CSUs. But for now, they're starting this pilot with public schools in certain places. Are there certain community colleges that are better for the TAG program? Not necessarily, but I will say if you do have a certain UC campus in mind, like my Santa Barbara example, sometimes going there, and I think like Santa Monica College in LA is a good pipeline to UCLA. Sometimes getting in proximity in their service area, as they call it, can be helpful. But here in the Bay Area, there's names that just come up more often than not. So College of Marin seems to be quite popular. Skyline seems to be quite popular. But I don't know that there's a difference necessarily in quality there. I just see those names more often. So it might just be about zip codes and where people are living and what's more accessible for them. And then have you heard good things about University of Nevada at Reno, I'm guessing? And I'm going to say, yes, I have. In fact, they flew me out there 2 years ago in the middle of winter. That's why I wasn't driving over the Tahoe area for a day-long visit with a bunch of Bay Area counselors. And I was so impressed with Reno. I feel like this is a hidden gem. I will say that The state of Nevada funds their very few colleges, because it is not a super populated state, in crazy ways. I think that UNR had just had like $800 million invested into it in the last year or two upon my visit. Um, they had all new buildings, gorgeous campus. Their dorms were lovely, just a real sense of school spirit. And they are a WUI school. So, for those of you, again, paying close attention to finances, there is something called WUE, WUE, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, where they will offer an in-state tuition price to folks from Western states. And so Reno is one of those places where you would pay California state tuition prices, even though it's out of the state. So it can be very financially compelling. And it's a little smaller than some of the UCs and all the rest. So I think that for a large public school, it's a little bit easier of a step up for students coming from a small school like JCHS. So I love, love, love Reno. I'd encourage you to go out and take a look if you're at all interested in it. And you're like pretty close to Tahoe, and then you've got the fun casinos there and the mountains and all. I mean, I think the location is really great. So. Okay, it's 7:27. We seem to have exhausted the questions in the chat, which is amazing. So I'm just going to remind you about your next steps, questionnaires in your inboxes in about 17, 18 minutes. Sign up for your meetings with me. I cannot wait to sit down and get to know each of you and talk about what you're thinking about. If you have no idea what you're doing, that's fine. We're going to talk about that too. And please email me, let me know what's on your mind, questions as things come up in the next few weeks. And one more question. Will the CSU's auto acceptances from public high schools hurt chances of admission at Cal Poly? I wish I had an answer to that. I don't at this point. But my guess is no. I think they are going to try and be equitable in all the ways that they have been. And they are going to have to manage that. They're not just going to be taking everyone. And their standards, especially at Cal Poly, might be different from, say, a Cal State LA or a Cal State Channel Islands that have much higher admit rates than Cal Poly. So as I learn more about this, I will let you know. I go to conferences a couple times a year at this point, both for local California issues and then for national issues. So as I've got more information, I will absolutely keep you posted. All right. And then I will also say to parents, for those of you who've done this before, you know this, but if you are new to college advising at JCHS, we will have a series of coffees with Miss Cook in the spring. I tend to do them once a month, again on Zoom, starting 8 to 9 a.m. in the morning. I record them if you are not able to be there, but if you want to start your day with me, I usually do a little programming up top, take questions for the rest of the time, and we just get to know each other, get all of your questions out of the way so you don't always have to be in my office to ask them. And students, my door is open to you whenever you want to come by. So thank you all for being here. Good luck. We're going to have a great process, and I look forward to seeing your questionnaires. All right, have a good night.